I didn't know that I had lots of negative connotations with the word until you asked me to feel it in my body. And I'm like, oh, that actually did kind of tickled a bit.
These traits, if you can take them on and embrace them, if you can stop making them a bad thing, these are going to make you a better doctor. And in particular, they're going to make you a better leader. And when I say leader, don't tune out if you're not in like the C-suite or if you're not the head of the department. Being a leader is also just about having self-leadership, holding yourself in a way that is led from you and your integrity. The third word is...
Ooh, these are great, Becc. How did you come up with these? These are so juicy.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
So guys, I just dropped Kristeen in like the hey, and also PS, we're live right now.
I'm ready.
I guess I'm ready. I'm ready if you say so. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode. So this is a fun one. Today we're going to talk about stuff that feels a little bit, it brings up those emotions in us. It brings up that resistance in us, and it brings up our ceilings, our blocks in doing that. So today we're talking about 3 bad traits that we think every doctor should have, right? These traits, if you can take them on and embrace them, if you can stop making them a bad thing, these are going to make you a better doctor. And in particular, they're going to make you a better leader. And when I say leader, don't tune out if you're not in like the C-suite or if you're not the head of the department. Being a leader is also just about having self-leadership, holding yourself in a way that is led from you and your integrity. So there are leaders at all parts of our traditional medical hierarchy. And we know that people like you who listen to a podcast like this want to be leaders in your life. You want to be people who aren't swayed by other people's influence when it means stepping off your integrity. You want to be the kind of person who stays in your integrity at all times, no matter what the outside forces. So stick around and listen to this episode. We're going to challenge you with some traits that so many of us think are bad, but if you can embrace them, they're going to be very, very good for you. All right, so let's get into the first one, Kristeen. And what we're going to do in this episode is I'm just going to throw out a word and we're just going to take a minute of silence to see what comes up. And I want you guys to do the same thing. What comes up in your body? What's the feeling? Even if you haven't got that much emotional awareness, just notice, do I feel contracted or unpleasant? Do I feel a bit lower, ick with this, or like sort of nervous system activation? Or do I feel this openness and desire and wanting, this feeling of yes in my body when I give you this word? So you ready? Sit back, tune in, and we're going to hand over to Kristeen. The first word is pride.
Yeah. It's actually interesting. So what's coming up for me is a little bit of a funny feeling. I didn't know that I had lots of negative connotations with the word until you asked me to feel it in my body. And I'm like, oh, that actually did kind of like tickled a bit. I think pride is an interesting one because I feel like as doctors, we've got so many things that we should be proud of, like objectively so. And what's also true is I think culturally, maybe we weren't always raised to be sticking out, or I guess not that we weren't praised, but maybe there was like, if you have siblings and things, you got to be a little bit measured in terms of how much praise you get versus your siblings. You're sort of more encouraged to self-deprecate and not get above your station. And I guess apart from like being proud of achievements or what it means to have a lot of achievements and maybe stand out a little bit, the other thing that comes up for me when I think of pride is like when people are being too proud to know that they're wrong, like they're stubborn or insightless even. So I think it feels like it should be a positive word. And what's also true is it's got these negative underlays. So it's a really interesting word to bring up. Yeah, I'm super keen to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? The word came up for me at the start of last year as something that I wanted to work on for myself. It's so funny because I've grown up with the same sort of cultural messages. I feel like it really is cultural that Australia has the tall poppy syndrome, but then again, you didn't grow up in Australia and you've experienced the same kind of thing. But this kind of concept that it's a zero-sum game, that if you feel proud of yourself, then it somehow takes away from somebody else, that it affects another person in a negative way. Like the more that you feel proud, the less that somebody else can feel proud. That's definitely something that I've had to grapple with. I've got this like little twisted up relationship between feeling proud, confident, and arrogance. And the second interesting thing you said is ignorance. And I that's probably my biggest fear. It's probably one of my biggest blocks when it comes to confidence, that I would feel so confident and kind of ride that momentum of working with what you've got and making the biggest impact with what you've got. And then in doing that, not being aware enough of your blind spots. And time again, I've found that that doesn't play out for me. Even when I'm at my most confident, I don't suddenly have an inability to see the problems and the deficits and the challenges to come up. It's really funny. And I guess I'm, as somebody who's started to try to feel more pride in my life, only in taking on that challenge have I started to see, wait a second, that fear doesn't actually play out. Every time it doesn't play out. And then another interesting thing I found was when I mentioned pride to somebody last year, as I'd started to talk about how this is really something that I'm trying to develop in my life, they had mentioned that in Christianity, it has really negative connotations. And culture, I mean, religion can be such a powerful influence on all of us. You just say a word with disdain and you put it in this context where it means something different to, I guess, what we're talking about here. It probably means those two things we just said, being arrogant and being ignorant, when actually having pride just means being proud of your life, yourself, your contribution, the value that you have to give. And we know that that's a really useful belief to have in terms of how it affects your behaviors, how you show up, whether you do contribute or not. When I didn't have any pride, and when I was so afraid of being arrogant and ignorant that I was always self-deprecating, that was the time that I was the most self-obsessed, constantly thinking about all the things that I was doing wrong or not quite good enough at, not expert at. That's an endless task. That means you're just constantly thinking about yourself. And of course, from that place, I contributed the least. I was the least generous in my life when I thought less of myself. So I just feel like you've kind of bundled them up so beautifully, Kristeen. We didn't rehearse this at all, but Kristeen's just like, boom, boom, boom. Here are the most common, the most common blocks to feeling pride. But I hope that by kind of painting out my personal experience that I've had with pride over the last year in particular, where I've worked quite hard on it in terms of being like, whoa, why doesn't that feel good? And then exploring that, it truly has been an experience of me only being less self-orientated, because I'm less self-critical, less self-doubting, less self-loathing. That takes up a lot of brain space. So I actually think less about myself when I have more pride, and then also ultimately contributing more. So I hope you guys can see that maybe these connotations, these negative connotations that you have with feeling proud of yourself and feeling pride, might be one of the most loving and generous things that you could do for yourself and for the world simultaneously. Yeah, I don't know. I had the same experience as you when somebody brought up the word pride for me. I thought I had a good relationship with it, but it was when I sat and I was like, oh, wait a second. It doesn't feel good. And I tried to write about what I'm proud of and why I should feel pride. And it didn't come easily. And if anything, I just felt that those fears and blocks come up. So yeah, same experience.
Can I ask you this is off topic, can I ask you a question about that? Because I feel like if I was to sit and journal out, like, I am proud of XYZ, I might be able to do that. But then if you were to, well, maybe Obviously, to you, it's a bit different, but I feel like talking to someone else about what you're proud of feels so different to talking to yourself about it. Like it's almost
That's
like others don't allow us to feel proud. And so I guess I wondered, so you worked on that word to try and change your relationship with that word, and you were saying that it had this beautiful impact and the way you showed up and the amazing light that you were able to bring into the world. Have you had any negative pushback from that?
this is the funny thing too. Like, just as I was saying, as I started to execute on pride, it proved all of my fears wrong. And that's the thing that we do with coaching. Yeah, we intellectually challenge these negative connotations and these fears that we have, but ultimately we take action so that we get the chance to not just intellectually disprove these things, but to create evidence in real life that our fears actually aren't true. That's not always the case. Our fears obviously are true sometimes, but in this case, through doing the reps and reps and reps of, oh, wait a second, when I show up this way, this fear doesn't come to life. And I can't think of one time over the last year that I was feeling like I was in my pride and somebody made me feel uncomfortable or shut me down. And maybe I've been selective. It's very possible I've been selective. And another place I guess I do it is social media, where you don't get that much negative feedback. Actually, we're just talking about trolls. We do occasionally get trolls, but you don't get that much feedback. And I guess what I'd say to that is it could be true that maybe I am making people uncomfortable. And I can definitely see how that's the case. If you're somebody who has discomfort with pride for yourself, you're probably not going to feel comfortable when somebody else is expressing their pride. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because you've got these negative connotations about what it means. But also in doing that, it didn't matter enough. People's discomfort wasn't going to change me showing up in this way that I had very much decided I need to show up in to have the impact that I want to have. So it's just really good to explore these questions. And I'm a really big advocate for us giving ourselves the chance to prove our fears wrong, because they can just stay a theoretical possibility forever, and our brain can always worry about them. But when you start to get some reps under your belt of, oh, wait a second, that wasn't true this time, that wasn't true this time, that wasn't true again this time, it can just really help with creating the evidence that you need to make your brain feel more capable of taking the action.
I love that. So more like an internal struggle that you're describing as well. It's so interesting, isn't it, that a lot of these things we just put on ourselves. And oh my God, this is actually so fun. What's the next word?
Yeah, okay, the next word. I'm really interested as how you'll feel about this, because you're such a Kristeen. If you guys haven't listened to enough episodes to pick this up yet, which is probably a total of one episode that you need to pick this up, Kristeen is a ball of light and love. And so I'm really interested as to your connotations with this word. Kristeen's a ball of light and love, and she's also a powerful leader, both personally and formally, right? So the word is, guys, pull your shoulders back, open up your body, tune back in. The word is assertive.
Yeah, that brings a heaviness. That one brings a heaviness. And I think I have I guess a conscious challenge with this word and what it means to behave in an assertive way. This one I associate with bossiness, harshness, rudeness, just aggression, even like in terms of if you're communicating with someone, it's just like it sort of portrays a more direct, to the point communication style, which I associate with not taking account of how it's going to land or that person's feelings. And so whilst I know that I am capable of being assertive, it feels like something I keep in reserve for essential situations. You really have to take me quite far before I will become assertive. And so I think I associate it with like I need to change my tone. And so that's actually really interesting, because I don't even think that's what it means, but I've decided that that's what it means.
Especially because I guess for me personally, I guess we just want you to explore what comes up for you, the connotations, because I guess different words can mean different things for different people. But I certainly think of assertive as being more of a neutral description of somebody, like a way to describe direct, as you said, direct, to the point, clear communication without adding all the filler words, and the softness or the lead-ins, the ability to just take up space and take the action that needs to be taken to get the job done. And then, like, there's that other part of the spectrum that you're talking about, where lower down on the spectrum, we've got the strongly negative ways of, I guess, being assertive, which are being bossy, being rude, and then further down and aggressive. Yeah. So I think of assertive as that neutral word for clear, crisp, to the point communication. And to your point, I completely agree that we have space for softness. We have time in our day for softness and relating to people in a way that has those kind of fillers in it that kind of suggest we're not in a rush and we've got time for niceties, and I want to make this a question and not a direct sort of statement of what I think or order. I think we've got so much time and space for that in medicine. And the reason that I wanted to bring this up for us is because there's also a time and space for assertiveness, for that direct, clear communication. And I think in medicine, we underuse it. I think we underuse it because of exactly your fears, being perceived as being bossy or harsh, rude. And then with that, how that affects the receiver. If we think that somebody's being harsh or rude to us, kind of implies that they don't care about us. We're sort of at their disposal. We're just barking orders. You've got this delicate balance too, where you've got the hierarchy, where you don't kind of have to be nice because you're in the hierarchy. So you just bark the orders, right?
Well, I'm thinking about barking orders and how, oh God, like, wouldn't that be the worst? But I wonder if people interpret me as barking orders at them. That would be hilarious. No, I was actually thinking about everything you just said makes so much sense. But I was having this flashback to when I was a medical student, so even less, inverted commas, assertive than I might even be today. But we were in one of those when you're being filmed and there's someone behind the glass and you're in there with your little med student buddies just trying to save someone's life that's hypotensive. And I think I was the team leader this day, and it was so funny because I thought my perception of myself was I was under control, and I was like, saline, stat, blah blah blah. I thought I was doing that, and then see when you watched back the video, hilarious. I was like, can we have some saline, please? Yeah, if you can, that would be great. Thank you so much. And I'm talking medical emergency training. And I mean, was there anything less effective than my communication skills? All that softness. You don't got time for softness in there, Kristeen, but it was like, I had no idea that that's how gentle I was. I had to be shown it on video. It's so funny.
I was just working with one of my clients this morning on this, and I just offered a little tweak because, like I'm saying, this is not simply good or bad. Everybody can pick their own communication style. But my issue with this is in medicine, and particularly as women, we usually use 99% soft filler words, non-assertive language, not even rude, just not assertive. And I just made this little tweak. I just offered this little tweak to her because she was like, she asked it as a question, do you have this research available to contribute? And I said, could we just try on and see what happens, see how you feel if you just said, Dada, can you provide this research? It's such a subtle change. And even just that little tweak, it brought up that like, oh, I'm being too directive. I can't say enough how useful it is for me being on the receiving end of really direct communication like that, and having personally and professionally, I love it when somebody's really clear about what they want and they're really clear about their expectations of me too. And here's where I think we need to make the tweak for all of us to allow ourselves to bring assertiveness into our life. I think we need to realize that even when you assert yourself and you speak so directly, you're still not making demands, right? You still, as a respectful person, you're interacting with another person, you're giving your direct, clear, concise, either request, order, expectation, but it's not a demand. You can't control other people, and unless that's your specific position that you've got a direct report who is under your careful supervision and you have to micromanage them for whatever reason. That's not usually the case. There's a space for the other person to respond. And if you're the kind of person who is genuinely caring, Kristeen's point was that she one of the connotations that automatically came up in our mind. And guys, this is not like our ultimate beliefs about the word. We're just interested in what comes up initially. We may or may not believe it, but we're interested in what kind of is our brain offering us initially, because these things still affect us. Just because and if you put Kristeen in that situation, you had to say those direct words, she would still be standing there after delivering that assertive behavior, very interested in the person's response and very open to receiving any concern that they had, any discomfort that they had, any request back that they had. And that is the reality of assertiveness. You can be assertive and you can still be caring. One doesn't negate the other. And so I'd like for you guys to, A, like we did with the first one, recognize what negative connotations you have. And then B, question, does being assertive actually mean that I'm not caring about the other person? Or can those two useful behaviors and values coexist? Because then you'll get the opportunity in 2025 to actually use assertiveness, which is highly appropriate, highly professional, highly effective, and to be honest, compassion and caring in a lot of cases, to just be so clear with somebody about their expectations. I can't tell you how many problems we have in our hierarchical business situations that literally come from a leader not being clear about their expectations. And I know you've done some work, Kristeen. You've been upskilling yourself in terms of leading teams in your business. And some of the advice that you got was, when you think that you're clear, you're probably still not clear. You could be more clear. You could be more clear. You could be more clear, right?
Eugene, my main team member, knows how unclear I can be. Sorry, Eugene.
And it's so fascinating to step out of our own perspective for a minute and be like, there are actually, when I ask something in a non-assertive way, there are so many misinterpretations. It can just sound like a suggestion that you might want somebody to do something, which is not helpful for anyone. So assertiveness was the second word. Now, the third word is shoulders back, chin into your body. You with me, my friend? Stop what you're doing. The third word that we commonly think of as a bad trait, but that we think that every doctor should have, is emotional.
Ooh, these are great, Becc. How did you come up with these? These are so juicy. Oh my God, I love this one. Emotional. Emotional. Yes. Yeah, it sounds like a bad word. It sounds like you're saying to me emotional is a negative thing, even though I'm a highly emotional creature. Yeah, being emotional, I guess what comes up is not able to cope with things, not being able to handle things, being too sensitive, oh God, I want to say female. I don't mean it like that. Oh please, I'm gonna get like really trolled.
I'm just gonna tune in here, guys, and remember, these are our automatic thoughts. Kristeen didn't even come up with these from her soul. We've all inherited all of these thoughts over our lifetime, over all the hanging out with my partner over the last couple of years. He's like linguistically so different to me. He says mate and he swears all the time and such an Aussie bloke. And occasionally I found myself, words just slip out of my mouth like mate. And I'm like, what? I didn't say mate. But just being around people, you pick up all these ideas. So this is why we're doing the exercise. We have to separate out what thoughts are ours, what thoughts do we want to keep, what connotations do we want to keep with these words, and which are the ones that we've just accidentally picked up through society. Because let me tell you, emotional and female, that is a societal connotation you picked up there.
Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting though? Because it's not part of my belief system. Oh
No.
my goodness. Yeah, and then also weakness just superimposing on there. Yeah, there's no good things when I think about emotional, even though rationally I could sort of think now, oh, like how you could get positive things out of being emotional, but most of it is very negative. Yeah. What's your solution to this, Becc? Help us out.
Look, the word emotional, I love it so much as a test for everybody, because so much of what I do in coaching, I call myself a mindset coach. And I think a lot of people don't realize that within that, we do a lot of emotional work, because what's inherently tied to what your brain is doing, what your brain is perceiving in the world, is the emotional reaction that you have to it. And we actually know there's so much brilliant research coming out in the last couple of decades, about how impactful emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is for being an effective leader and in healthcare as well, and how detrimental it can be when you're somebody who tries to not be emotional. And when we try to not be emotional, all that really means is we suppress our emotions. So I want us to redefine our concept of emotion. I think all that we think about when we think about emotion is a loss of control, a lack of control, and being hysterical. There's another female word attached to emotion, and feminine quickly jumps into weakness. All these connotations we've accidentally picked up that ironically make us more emotional, not less emotional, right? Because when we suppress our emotions, we become more easily irritable, and those emotions kind of spill over in different ways that we don't have control of. As opposed to when you get more emotional, as in you're more willing and able to feel emotions, you're more aware of the emotional experiences in your body, what they are and what they're not, you get more control over those emotions. You become less, quote, emotional in the sense that you react to those emotions less. There's so much power in this small change of accepting your emotions versus trying to suppress them. I also wanted to talk about just circling back to this whole emotional female connotation. I also think like emotional crying, teary kind of comes up quite easily for me, or sadness, things like that. And I've started to do this thing recently where I made a reel the other day just saying, guys, like everyone is emotional. There is no one who is not emotional. What there is there's a category of people who aren't aware of their emotions. They are the people who think they're not emotional, but they are the most emotional. And I've started to point this out in my life. So when we classically think of emotions as being a female trait, but I started to watch for where men in my life express emotions. And I'll make a little comment just because I want to change this bias a little bit myself. So I'll say when people express anger and frustration, or they'll cut off a conversation in a way that's sort of reactive, and that to me clearly emotional way, it's this fiery way. It might look like, playing on the last word, when we see a male do those kind of like forceful behaviors, like cutting off a conversation or something like that. It might look like they're just being controlled and stern, but that can often come from a reaction to an emotion. They're getting an irritation. They can't stay in this conversation any longer. So they cut it off with force. And if you're not able to have your own emotional awareness to see what drives you to do certain things from your emotional place, then you also won't be able to recognize emotions in other people. So I will say, and when I see things on political things or things on social media or people in my actual life, men who have typically been more, what's the word? Condescending in terms of females being emotional, I'll say, oh, that's a big emotional reaction. That's a big emotion you're having right now. And it's just an observation. When you see somebody react in anger or frustration, something that we think are normal, powerful behaviors for men, there are also emotional reactions too. Intolerance, boredom, things like that. They're emotional reactions as well. So all of this to say, there's so many connotations to pull apart with being emotional, but trying to not be emotional is going to make you more emotional. It's going to make you more reactive to emotions, i.e., lose control when you have that emotional experience come up in your body. And instead, being more emotional, as in being more accepting of, embracing of, curious about, welcoming towards your own emotions, sadness, anger, hopelessness, powerlessness, shame, excitement, happiness, pride, anxiety, overwhelm. To embrace those emotions, ironically, means they're not going to be the thing that controls your behavior. You can feel an emotion without reacting to it, and you can just receive the message that comes with that emotion. Does that kind of make sense?
You're blowing my mind. And I literally had never thought about men having emotions like what you were saying. I just had never occurred. Although I know that anger is an emotion, like you're right, it feels like a strong emotion. It's got strength in it, where crying is more kind of like a weakness. But to be honest, they're all emotions, and neither of them are really good or bad. It's just the way we've been conditioned. And you just changed so much for me just by saying that.
Yeah.
Probably what's really true is I think I have felt like societal pressures that I am the quintessential emotional female, and that part of me has been rejected on little micro traumas throughout my life, to the point where it's debasing. And you just saying that to me has been so helpful, because I'm like, wow, like we're not dissimilar. Like their emotional reaction's not dissimilar to mine, it just gets handled by society differently.
Yes, they have an emotion and they're not called emotional. They're called powerful. It's a really important permission giving thing to allow ourselves to be emotional, because if we keep making emotions a bad thing, we're just going to keep trying to suppress them, and they're just going to get more power over us. And as you're saying, Kristeen, if we can recognize every single person is emotional, and then we can start to realize it's okay for me to feel an emotion too, and we can start that cycle of inviting them in.
I don't in any way want to sort of put down any kind of emotion like anger. I feel like it's beautiful to realize like someone else's emotional response is different from yours. But the truth is that having an emotion like anger helps you climb up that emotional scale. Like it helps you to feel better. It's a discharge of something that's stuck within you, or like an irritation. I want to be celebrating a different emotional reaction to mine. Like crying's great, get it out. But also, if obviously not in a like way that hurts other people, or you got to kind of be emotionally regulated enough to not be problematic to those around you. But just being angry is not a bad thing. And I think sometimes we actually do demonize that, or kind of shy away from it. We can't handle anger in the same way that some people can't handle tears. And so I just wanted to sort of say, I think you make such an interesting point, but not to, I guess, if there are any, I don't know how many men listen to our podcast, but if you're a man and you're listening to this podcast, I just wanted to say also that anger is actually a good thing, and feeling those emotions is a good thing therapeutically to help you move into a better emotion.
The reason that I contrasted men and women there was just because we have this connotation of women being emotional, and I want you guys to be able to use emotions to your benefit, not just not react to them, but also like generate the emotions you want, generate the confidence, the assertiveness, the pride, the motivation, the drive. We want you to be able to use your emotions for what they're meant to do, which is drive your behavior. And when we demonize emotions and try and suppress the negative ones, we suppress the positive ones too. We just get less skilled in general with emotions. And I think one of the worst things that we've done to men in society is tell them they can't feel emotions. I get so much benefit from being able to feel my emotions. It sucked back way then when I was a too emotional female and I was trying to not be so emotional. That was awful when I was suppressing my emotions that way. And this is an invitation for all women to recognize that you can't be too emotional as a female. That's a made up thing. We all just have emotions. But also for men, you guys are probably by default also suppressing your emotions too, because society has taught you that you're not allowed to feel emotions. You're not supposed to. It's a feminine thing. It's not a masculine thing, and so on. And I just think that would be one of the toughest ways to live your life. You are a human, and emotions are a core part of how you function and move around the world. Stop suppressing your superpower and start doing that by pulling up. How do I feel when I think about being emotional? What are the connotations that make me feel that way? And what do I actually believe? So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. We hope it was absolutely powerful. We're going to call this words to uncancel for 2025, but Kristeen didn't know what cancelling meant.
I must live under a rock. I felt about 90 years old. She was trying to explain it to me. I was like, well, what are we cancelling? What is she talking about?
Somebody please explain to Kristeen what cancelling means. And with that, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in